Welcome back, YouTube fam. Just another overview video of a diver that has eluded me in my hunt to try and own every diver out there. This is the overview and review of the Sinn T1 EZM14. Okay, one of the coolest watches I think to come out of the Sinn line, and I'm going to explain why. Real quick, let's just go over the specs. So we got a diameter of 45 millimeters, which sounds huge, but remember that's from one side to the other of this cushion case. You've got a lug to lug of about 49. It's actually a little bit smaller. Thickness of 12.5 millimeters. This is huge, okay? And I'll explain why, because the next spec is depth rating of 1,000 meters. Okay, so this is a 1,000-meter depth resistant dive watch, and it's only 12 millimeters, 12.5 millimeters thick. Most watches are 200 millimeters or 300 and are much thicker, so that's something cool about this watch. Dimensionally, it's an anomaly. This particular specimen has the ETA 2892 A2 movement. This is the last year that this watch was made by Sinn, and unfortunately it is now discontinued. For some reason, Sinn keeps killing off their awesome engineering or engineered watches, I should say. We've got grade 5 titanium with a tegimented grade 5 titanium bezel. Unfortunately, the whole watch is not tegimented, just the bezel, but we've got grade 5 up here. And then we've got their bracelet, which is grade 2 titanium. And I'll explain why, or potentially why, we have two different grades here. But let's come back to this. I've currently got it on a 22 millimeter NATO, and I want to kind of go over some of the pros and cons of this watch, and kind of my thoughts on it. In the meantime, just a quick wrist check, and wearing the Seal Omnidiver Mark 1. More on that later. So let's put all this to the side, come back to it. So one of the first things that you notice with this watch is it is very, very thin. Okay, I am used to thicker watches, or as I like to say, watches with more wrist presence. This is 12.5 millimeters thick, and that's on top of, from the bottom of the case, which is pretty flat and comfortable, to the top of the sapphire. If I remove this NATO real quick, I'm gonna just show you guys how the cushion style case works. So it's kind of scooped, if you will, and it sits really flat on the wrist, but very comfortably. As you can see, the lugs do taper down, and the lug hole, or the strap pin hole, is pretty close to the bottom. So from strap pin to strap pin, that's approximately your 49 millimeter lug to lug. This does come with the sapphire crystal, and fortunately for me, at least, as a huge lume fan, this has by far some of the best looms Sinn's ever put out, and which is great because it is a dive watch, but it's also part of the EZM mission timer series, meaning legibility, which is amazingly clear on this watch, and the loom matches it. Unfortunately, for some of the other dive watches from Sinn, the loom, at least for me, has been somewhat subpar. It's not the greatest. Sure, it's so-called long-lasting, but it is not to the level of, say, Seiko or Tudor, Pelagos, or even the king right now for me, which is the Seal Omnidiver. So the loom is great, and I'll insert a loom shot photo. It is also bi-colored, meaning you've got, I think you've got a blue and a green, and that's there to differentiate the minute time, because it is a mission timer, sorry. Here you have a really small inconspicuous date window, which matches perfectly well with the background. The date wheel color is matching the dial. It is a black matte dial and nothing extra, nothing fancy. It is just very plain and ready to go. The seconds hand does have a strip of lume on it. It is sufficient, but it's usually not enough to last the timeline. So for example, if you charge this at night, you go to bed, you'll be able to see everything else, including this pip, but the seconds hand, unfortunately, just due to the lack of surface area, disappears, which is fine. One of the other cool traits this watch has is it's got a captive bezel, meaning it just doesn't turn. You have to push down and turn. And it has 60 clicks, and which are very well defined. And I love a good bezel click, so you just have to make sure you push down on this in order to turn it. There's no real movement back and forth, but again, because it is a push down captive style bezel, it's cool. It doesn't turn on its own. Again, it is held in. There's no compression spring. It's actually held in by these 4 very tiny screws that kind of mount it to the ring around the sapphire. So that's cool. This is tegimented, meaning it's hardened via their proprietary aka heat treat process, and let's be honest, most bezels are usually where dive watches and or thicker watches get nicked, dinged, damaged, so it's cool that they did that. My preference would have been if this was in black, like the rest of their SDR line. I think that would have been cool, and it would have kind of given it a little bit of contrast from the case. Next item to talk about is the sapphire that's on here. So I'm guessing it's a little bit thicker to account for the 1,000 meter depth rating. The T2, which is the smaller one, has a higher rating of 2,000 meters, but I'm assuming that's because it's just a little bit smaller, whereas this one's a little bit thinner and stretched out. And in order to probably keep that rating at 2,000, they would have probably had to put a thicker piece of sapphire. This has AR on both the outside and inside, and when it is perfectly clear, it is awesome. Unfortunately for Sinn and a lot of their models, including their dive watches, the U1, UX, U1 Pro, if there is an AR coating on the outside, it is easy to get scratched or kind of bites on it from just little hits that you get. And so quite a few Sinners who own these watches end up taking some micro polish and kind of removing it. The AR is also a source of tons of smudging. So if you hate having smudges on your watch or dial, it's going to contribute. The other thing is this watch, if you see here right by the 9 o'clock in super dark lettering, you can see it's AR filled, so it's argon filled, which is there to help the dehumidification. And at 6 o'clock you can see there is a little like capsule pill, and that's also another part of their, I think it's their copper sulfate dehumidifying system, so that way if there is any humidity due to temperature swings, you won't get any condensation on the inside of the watch, which is cool. And apparently I've just been educated by some fellow Sinners that there's more of these within the watch, and this is the only one that's displayed. And what's cool to me is this one's actually inside the watch compared to having them externally on some of the Sinns. What else? So this has a signed Sinn crown. It's nice and big, and I'm wearing gloves right now. You can see it come out, and it has that great pop that just comes out. Winds beautifully. Has a 3 position, so winding, date, and hacking, if you will. And put that back in. Very easy to use with gloves, which is great. Killer watch. The back, as you can see here, where does it say? Titan grade 5. So the head is grade 5 titanium, which is really cool, which is also why it's super light. I think this weighs like, I want to say 98 grams or so, just the head, which is crazy considering it's got a movement in there. Now let's talk about the bracelet. So the bracelet is grade 2 titanium, and this is where I kind of start the come on Sinn rant, if you will. So grade 2 is much easier to machine than grade 5, and fortunately the bracelet, in my opinion, should have been, I mean, this whole thing should have been tegimented and hardened, because grade 2 is going to take scratches and dings and chips a lot easier than grade 5. So it's surprising to see their bracelet is of grade 2. The other issue that comes up is you've got removable end links. I don't know why, but these end links just mount separately with a strap pin, so you got to put them in there. That's cool, I guess. Unique to Sinn. I've never seen that on any other watch. Even like lowly Seiko SKXs have like hollow end links, and they're the ones who have this kind of style. I'm not going to get too deep into this, but this is the typical Sinn stamped clasp, 3 micro adjusts, basic dive extension, if you will. I think this is where Sinn needs to really change their philosophy and how they do this. Sure, this is working and this is great, and you know, because it's simple, it'll last forever. In my opinion, they need to start coming into the new fold of things where everyone's got a micro adjust, toolless micro adjust, machined, and you can still kind of keep this slim profile. It's time to do something about this, guys. The lack of having a half link also kind of gives you limited options, and then here with only 3 positions, you really aren't getting full flexibility or capability, because 3 half links is literally a link in movement. And here you can see it does say Rhine Titan, so titanium. So that's the bracelet. For right now, I have this on a NATO, and that's probably just because it's a little more comfortable. I'm kind of accentuating the thickness by having it on a NATO. It wears very, very, it's a great watch, don't get me wrong. It is cool to wear, and I think based on how, you know, it's a large diameter, very short cushion case, so it kind of wears like a, dare I say, a Seiko Turtle with that style case. It is crazy to see this at 45 millimeters, but barely 2 to 3 millimeters more in lug to lug. Great watch. The only things I would change would be maybe the bracelet clasp potentially, and making this bezel an SDR style, all black. Other than that, I think this is a great addition. It is still debatable whether I'm going to keep this in the collection or not. I've got a lot of love for cool watches, but I usually don't end up wearing them. So this may or may not be something that stays. It's currently for sale right now, but I'm still kind of torn because I have been chasing this for about 3 years, and I finally got one, especially one of the last few that they discontinued, which is cool because it has the movement, the ETA movement. So I guess that kind of concludes the overview. I want to take the time and, you know, recommend, if you have any questions, concerns, feel free to put them down in the comments. As always, I do try to respond and get back to everyone. But yeah, check you guys all out in the next one. Cheers and happy holidays. All right, just wanted to bring it back to show the T1 on my wrist. I've got a 7.35, 7.4 inch wrist, and on the NATO, as with all NATOs, it does lift it up a little bit, but honestly, you're at 12.5 millimeters thick. The short lug to lug really makes this easy to wear. Honestly, a la Tim Masso style, you could probably wear this on a 6.5 inch wrist if you really like big watches. And because it's so light, it's a breeze to wear and enjoy. I will probably take another video with it on the bracelet. But for now, this is what it looks like, and yeah, that is super slim and light, very easy and comfortable on the NATO.